I would say use.
Okay, it might be live. You can talk about Mr. Rogers later.
Wait, did Mr. Rogers get canceled? Hi, welcome to Rules for Retrogrades 12.
Mr. Rogers' shoe selection was perfectly fine.
Why did he? That's weird. What the hell was Goofy? No, why did Mr. Rogers wear tennis shoes? Even as a kid, I was put off by that.
Oh, it seems like an odd thing for a kid to be put off by. All right, so we're... Is this a recording, or are we in a sound loop, or a Retrograde Nation? This is Tim and Dave Gordon with episode number 12. I believe we are streaming live. I'm sorry. Personal apologies for the technical difficulty. Yeah, if you can hear us, then we are ready to go. We are talking today about the new missive from the good Archbishop Vigano. Every time he weighs in, as he did, almost 10 times now, Taylor and I would cover it on TNT, Mr. Dr. Taylor Marshall. And the first 3 missives from the good Archbishop were substantive insofar as they broke news. Since then, letters 4 through, I guess this is 9 by my count, the letters have constituted commentary. I deem, Dave, you weigh in, that this, entitled Pope Subjecting Church to Powerful Forces That Want World Government, is his most powerful commentary to date. The gloves are off the most to date. And he's pointing out not news items, but ostensible purloined letters on the mantle from the Pachamama business and from the globalism afoot in the Vatican that, strangely enough, like I said, they're like a purloined letter on the mantle we just didn't see. And he's really out there.
Yeah. Honestly, I have a bit of a different take on this latest missive by Archbishop Vigano. I think this really serves as a broader indictment of the whole Francis pontificate, and it kind of was, pointed specifically at the Amazon Synod and at Pachamama specifically. But I really think that Vigano is taking those things and he's making them kind of a figurehead or an analogy for the whole pontificate, because he does go into some of the syncretistic elements of this pontificate. The ecumenism run amok. And he addresses it directly in the letter. He's talking about how Pope Francis has basically said explicitly that God willed a plurality of religions. So, and of course that can't be. The divine essence is such that it's truth, right? Christ is the Logos. The Logos is God. So we know that God, being truth, can't will people to fall into falsehoods and to follow a lie. And if there are multiple religions saying many different things, then per the principle of non-contradiction, then they can't all be right. And we know on faith that the Catholic Church has the fullness of the truth. So beyond just the Pachamama heteropraxy and idolatry and the Amazonian Synod, where these Masonic anti-Christic forces that Vigano, as Vigano calls them, have kind of co-opted the church in a way. I think he's just saying that this pontificate has been rife with error in a more general way. And as opposed to going down the line and giving us a litany, an ad seriatim list of where Pope Francis has erred, I think he took a few of the greatest hits that have been bothersome to the faithful and kind of, again, made them an analogy for the whole pontificate. That was my read. That's my thesis.
Yeah, I mean, remember in the 6th and 7th letters from Vigano, he addressed specifically what the Pope was doing in the Abu Dhabi error, catastrophe, train wreck. And yeah, I mean, Archbishop Vigano has more information than any of us combined. Archbishop Vigano has states evidence, which is unlike us. And so when he is squinting at the things he's squinting at in this missive, it really makes me think twice. To not to put too fine a point on it, but he uses the term anti-Christic, meaning antichrist. He uses the term powerful forces that want world government. I'm looking on LifeSite here. And the most important paragraph in this thing was on the Synod on the Amazon. This is what he reads. The Synod on the Amazon is also part of a much larger and hidden design. It is nothing but an element, albeit a disruptive one, of a vast project developed under the aegis of the United Nations and supported by the great financial and Masonic powers. How can we explain that the Pachamama idol is already present? This is, I think, the most important sentence. How can we explain that the Pachamama idol is already present through a UN initiative in text designed for the ideological indoctrination of children? This made me kick myself. We were talking about it with Steve Skojek yesterday, and of course Chris Plants, who isn't here. He hasn't been here for a live stream yet. And I could have kicked myself because I noticed the first, or maybe it was the beginning of the second week of the Amazon Synod, about the 13th, 14th of October, something like that, that Netflix had a Pachamama kids cartoon. There's world collusion. The question is the Vatican farming out to the UN and the globalists its kind of iconography and is it lending out its icons and its syncretistic one world agenda in terms of religion, or is it going the other way around? It now appears that it is borrowing from a preordained, agreed upon playbook. Agenda 2030 furthers this from March of this year. And everyone out there, this is all I'm saying. This is all I'm saying. Everything was preordained. Pachamama has been appearing in textbooks approved by the UN, and it's appearing in TV shows. It's appearing in the pop culture.
Yeah, that's a coincidence. That is just a hell of a coincidence because, I mean, what are the odds? Who'd ever heard of a Pachamama before, 3 months ago, 2 months ago? And then all of a sudden it's ubiquitous. This silly, topless demon idol, it's all over the place. So that, I mean, if that's coincidental, that's the greatest coincidence of all time. Now, I think the question is, what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Was it the church incorporating this that mainstreamed it, or was it the fact that, what Vigano calls the Masonic powers and the powers behind the powers, the shadow powers that had desired to push this all along and were just biding their time and choosing their moment? That would be my question.
Well, but you can't. I mean, that's the whole point. This is what Steve Skojek pointed out last night. And I feel foolish that I didn't see it. It's a kind of purloined letter on the mantle that we missed, as it were. You can't create, produce, and publish a cartoon series for Netflix, even though they control their own content, in like a week. You can't do so in a month. This Pachamama cartoon that was released during the Synod, people, was perfectly timed to be released during the Synod. To me, this is them overplaying their hand. And to Vigano, he's saying they're overplaying their hand. I mean, he's not speculating. See, we have all this self-recrimination and self-recusal about maybe we're kind of being tinfoil hat wearers by, making guesses and conjectures from behind the scenes here. But who was behind the scenes in the way that matters was the nuncio to the U.S. for 4 years, the good Archbishop Vigano. He says the Pope is subjecting the Church to powerful forces that want world government. Let's look how he opens. He says, for 20 centuries, the Catholic Church has professed faith in Jesus Christ, the only Savior, which has come down to us intact, as she received it from the apostles and the fathers of the Church at the price of the blood of the martyrs, and by the witness of the confessors of the faith and of innumerable saints of every period and language. The faith has been handed down by parents to their children, by priests and the religious. It has been spread by zealous missionaries to every continent in the world, under the guidance of the successors of Apostle Peter, who have guaranteed the unity of Christ's bride by confirming the brethren in the faith. For almost 7 years now, the successor of the Prince of the Apostles, who is entrusted with the mandate Christ conferred on Peter after his profession of faith, "You are Christ, the Son of the living God," has abdicated his ministry to confirm the brethren in the faith. This goes to your point, Dave, and it's not the first time he said it. Pope Francis has never confirmed anyone. We painfully acknowledge how divisive and destructive his ministry has been.
It's been, I mean, it goes against the Great Commission. The whole thrust of this pontificate has gone against the Great Commission in two major ways. Number one, adherence to sound doctrine has been called rigidity. Number two, evangelization, which is our Christian duty, it's a duty of the ordained and the faithful, has been called what? Proselytizing. As if we're just doing some polemic to get people onto our team and off the other team. It's a real us versus them mentality. No, it's us wanting to be soldiers for Christ, to get the gospel out there. And do you know how dispiriting it is to hear our father in the faith scolding us when we're trying to do the will of Christ, our Savior, and evangelize the world and hold fast to what's been passed down to us by word of mouth and by the epistle? Do you know how discouraging it is to be scolded by our pastor for this? I mean, it's so destructive what Pope Francis has done. It's made us, in a weird way, and especially the less well-catechized among us, feel pangs of guilt for carrying out the commission of our Lord. Because being a humble person, you know, as we all should strive to be, we put ourselves under this into submission to the Pope, right? We put ourselves into submission to the Church. So when a figure in the Church is speaking error so plainly, it's devastating to us, and especially, like I said, the less well-catechized, because you start wondering, well, maybe I am following Christ in the wrong way. Maybe I'm getting something wrong about the Great Commission. Maybe Christ meant by the Great Commission, you know, X or Y or Z, and he didn't mean what his words mean at face value. Now, of course, that's incorrect. Christ did mean to spread the gospel to the whole world, baptizing in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit.
But wait, this is a first principle, right? We don't have to split hairs. Pope Francis doesn't, you know, he's anti-Christic in terms of the Great Commission. We don't need Archbishop Vigano to tell us this. He calls all evangelization proselytization. Everyone knows this. We knew this by really the third year of his pontificate. When we discussed this pontificate, yesterday we were talking about it in a few different eras. Three. We divided into three. The red letter dates of this pontificate, I'd say that the end of the first era was basically the publication of Amoris Laetitia, and a slower kind of gradualism of the second era of the pontificate ended with the Summer of Shame and the Fall of Shame in late 2018. By now, what we need Archbishop Vigano to tell us, one, is, Dave and I don't think, as I think Taylor does think, as reasonable minds can differ here, we don't think that there's more data or evidence or hardcore facts that the good Archbishop has to release. Archbishop Vigano, if you hear me now, please release these. We understand if you're holding on to them, it might be for life protection, it might be a life insurance policy against these thugs. But if you have them, at some point we need them soon. I don't think there are more. I think his weathered, judicious, really fatherly judgment is coming now in the form of, I think the wad has been shot, has been spent, and now it's coming in the form of really, really good commentary. Like this. Yeah. Because I know you wanted to talk about Abu Dhabi, which he spoke of in two missives, the 6th and the 7th by my count. He goes on, with the declaration he signed in Abu Dhabi, in which Pope Francis states that the pluralism and the diversity of religions, color, sex, race, language are willed by God in his wisdom, and by his constant deviant condemnations of so-called proselytism, this is what you're talking about right now, Dave, Francis has not only mortified every missionary impulse, but has indeed rejected the mandate given by Christ to all the apostles. Go therefore and make the disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. So I mean, he kind of beat us to the punch here. This is just the third paragraph of the thing. I think the fourth and fifth are most important.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to, if Vigano has anything else for us in terms of information, in terms of damning information about the pontificate, and I want to jump in with that before we go on. It's time to get it out there, you know?
Yeah.
If you're gonna be a martyr for the faith, be a martyr for the faith. Don't give us a slow trickle of information and leave us guessing, because that militates against the faithful taking decisive action. Sometimes, you know, the best cure for infection or the bacteria overgrowth is just getting sunlight into a dark corner, right? It's the best of the disinfectants. We just need to know what's going on. So Archbishop Vigano, yeah, if you ever do stumble upon our channel, please just get everything out there, bring it to light, and let the faithful run with it. There are faithful apostolates. There are people like Church Militant. There are people like LifeSite. They're going to take this, and they're not going to let it die on the vine and not see the light of day. They will take it, and they'll bring it out there and not let it get buried. So I think that's the main thing.
Yeah,
the commentary is good. The commentary is fine, but you know, there's a lot of people that can be commentators. If anything,
we might not have any more. I mean that right. All the implications are that this is we're sitting around speculating. Archbishop Vigano might have watched TNT. And I'm not tipping the hand one way or the other, but we would make appeals on screen. I think we should do that now. Yeah, if there's anything left to reveal, for whatever reason it subjects itself to your judicious judgment, good Archbishop, please. We need to know it, because the summer of shame has already been swept under the rug, forgotten. But I think let me get to these paragraphs here. I think it's worth people. It bears repeating. The strategy of the current pontiff is camouflaged by deceit and lies. It is concealed by silence. When he is discovered in these, his deviant intentions, what great confusion they cause amongst the faithful, while they are astutely praised by the enemies of the church. This is the point. Pope Francis is without friends, well-wishers, supporters amongst the Catholic faithful anymore. By year 7, of this pontificate, they're gone. His only supporters are Jeffrey Sachs, George Soros, the UN, Agenda 2030, people out, maybe Time Magazine, people outside the church, because this pontificate has been propped up on two false means, two false expedients. The first, as Monsignor Charles Pope, another good Holy Father, one of the best priests in America, said, weaponized ambiguity. Every word or deed of this pontificate has been spiked with weaponized ambiguity. The second one is, in some ways, it's more effective and more deadly. Silence. Silence to the 100 scholars that made the appeal.
The
silence
opposite of evangelization isn't speaking false doctrine, because then the human intellect can parse what's false out and hold fast to the true deposit of faith, right? The opposite of evangelization is what Pope Francis is doing through this pontificate of silence.
Right.
That's what it is, and that's why it's so devastating, and it leaves us all to fester in ambiguity.
Yeah, that's right. It's remarkable. We were talking about this with Steve Skojic again yesterday. Lots of good insights were shared there, especially by Steve. We, myself included now, in a sort of passive way, have been a participator in all this over the last year and a quarter. And it's remarkable. I know the people out there going to their jobs, that don't involve bringing the news or commentary in the Catholic world. It's especially easy to be kind of lulled into a sleep by the constant bad news from Rome. But it happens to us in the commentariat as well, writing about it, speaking about it, thinking about it, theology teachers. It's a different kind of lull.
Yeah, people, the human condition is such, and think back through the 20th century if you need to. is such that when they're slowly acclimated to even horrendous conditions, the human spirit can put up with these things and slowly becomes desensitized to it. You know, that's how people are kind of just contently going on with their daily lives in like Maoist China or in the USSR, or you know, in the Third Reich. People get desensitized to things very, very quickly, and that's why I always chuckle. You know, the Republicans, conservatives in America, they'll look at a media report and be like, look, there's a backlash against these things we're trying to do. If we want to repeal Obamacare, there's going to be a backlash against it, and they get real frightened. Whereas the Democrats, you know, when they're passing something that's overwhelmingly unpopular, and this is a trait of progressives in general, if they're doing something unpopular, they just won't countenance that what they're doing is unpopular. They'll move ahead with it, and they'll be like, look, it's your move. I'm going to walk in with a giant gavel to Congress, and we're going to pass this overwhelmingly unpopular bill. And I dare you to remember this when the time comes. I dare you to remember this when we're up for the next vote, because I know your memory is short. The public is a bunch of undisciplined people. Their memories are short. They're going to get used to these conditions that we're ushering in, and you're not going to be able to do anything about it. That's the progressive gambit, and they're excellent at it. And, you know, people on the conservative side, they don't do this. They lose their steel really quickly. They're too pragmatic. But people of principle, and unfortunately, people on the left, progressives, are people of principle. Of evil principle, but of principle nevertheless. And they excel at it.
Yeah, it's a bit like speaking into the void. I mean, there's a certain act of faith by sitting here in my usual den, speaking into a camera. I mean, there's a kind of behavior that's changed. You know, it's not just my brother and I sitting here talking about this stuff, which we also do. It changes the behaviors. It's a certain act of faith. The progressives and really the radicals in the world that are headed up by Pope Francis. He's the point man. It's an act of faith to do what they do, and they do it well. He does it well. It's something that is, in an opposite and inverse way, to be admired, right? I mean, think about what he did. It was an act of faith. On that plane, 14 months ago, when he's coming back from, I think, Knock, Ireland, and he said to those reporters, I'm going to be silent. I'm not going to say one word until later. Maybe I will, but I probably won't. I'm going to rely on your professional judgment and your professional competence to, talk about a dog whistle, which radicals are always talking about. He's dog whistling to all reporters around the world who are all part of this team globalist, team, maybe it's Pachamama idol worshippers, to don't investigate. Stand down.
And he would just wait for the news cycle to change. That's what he's doing. He's like, reporters, I know your memories are short. You're going to have to cover other things. Like, I know you can't just wait me out. I have all the time in the world, and you have no coercive power over me. And even if you did have coercive power over me, you're not going to use it because you know I'm on your side. So I'm just going to wait here for the news cycle to change, and then you're going to do exactly what I think you're going to do. You're going to let this drop because you think that the public are disinterested. And guess what? They are, except for the 15 to 20 Orthodox Catholics in each country, or whatever the paltry, pathetic number is now. It's coming, and that's what's happened. So all of this time where we're getting the bad news on punctuated equilibrium, like I've said before, the analogy is like a period of rest when you have the stomach flu in between each time you have to vomit, and that's what this pontificate has been. It's been doing like these acute periods of vomiting up filth, followed by a period of rest, this very preordained, manipulative period of rest to let us cool down. Okay, things are fine now. He hasn't done anything bad in 6 months. There's been nothing heretical. And then, bam, woman deacons. Or bam, married priests.
We've never gone 6 months, though.
Days. Whatever it is. There's a period of rest. After Amoris Laetitia dropped, remember, things were chill for a little bit. And there's subtle provocations in between it. And he might even, give a reason to applaud the thing he says. He'll say, like, abortion's like assassinating a baby, or that gay seminarians shouldn't look at the priesthood, they should be gone. But so he'll throw us a bit of red meat every once in a while, and then bam, we pivot back into the period of acute retching, the period of where we're getting the bad stuff going forward. So
this seems to have been building toward a direct demonic assault on the world. Let me read it's a repeat of this paragraph because I read it first, even though it's the 5th paragraph. Let me read the 5th and the 6th paragraph and get your guys' responses. I think Pachamama is actually a thinly veiled demonic idol that they are trying to get. I mean, it's a developing theory. It's inchoate. It's nascent on my end. I think they're just trying to get it out there, get it publicity, get it in front of the public eye. I think there's something outright demonic to this. Listen to, and Archbishop Vigano seems to be suggesting it. He writes, for the 2nd time, the Synod on the Amazon is also part of a much larger and hidden design. It is nothing but an element, albeit a disruptive one, of a vast project developed under the aegis of the United Nations, supported by great financial and Masonic powers. All right, this guy knows where the bodies are buried, literally and figuratively, and he's talking about the Masonic design of political economy, worldwide political economy. How can we explain that the Pachamama idol is already present through a UN initiative in text design for the ideological indoctrination of children? Everything stands and fits together. A false science founded on an alleged catastrophic warming of the earth, which is chiefly caused by man. So this has been cooked up over the last 25 years. An integral ecology which places at the center of creation not man created in the image and likeness of God, called to share the divine life in a blessed eternity with his creator, but Mother Earth, but the Mother Earth divinity, the Pachamama, from which man is drawn and into which he must return. From this standpoint, therefore, even idolatry is willed by God. This is the connection with Abu Dhabi. He dropped 2 letters on that. And Pope Francis celebrates it before the world, profaning the most sacred place in Christian Rome, the basilica built upon the tomb of the Apostle Peter. There is no doubt. It's like that part in The Burbs when neighbor Art says, there's no doubt, as we sit here, they're Satanists. Now, that Archbishop Vigano has reached this level of clarity. He goes on to quote in the next paragraphs St. Paul talking about that. We could talk about that in a second, but this is stark stuff. Dave, this is stark. He's not, I mean, the gloves are off. The gloves are beyond off. They were off in letter 1. He has a theory here. He has a comprehensive theory of the whole.
Right. Yeah, I wish, and he has been somewhat explicit, I wish he would keep laying this. I want all the details that he has, that Vigano is privy to. I think the faithful have a right to whatever information he may have. And I know he is now encouraging us as a pastor, but more than that, we need Vigano to act almost as an investigative journalist. We need guys on the inside to turn over this information to us, because even though he's faithful, even though he is acting in his pastoral capacity, he's one man. And the faithful need a chance to take a crack at this too, because under canon law, we have a right and a duty to make our concerns known to our pastors, to the bishops, right? And Pope Francis and the bishops and the cardinals, they have a duty to come back and say and address what our concerns are. That's what they owe us in their pastoral office, right? That's what these prelates owe us, is to address our concerns. Now, all of you guys out there who are listening, I have felt from the beginning, Tim, I know you probably have too, that my father, my spiritual father, this Pope, finds me to be a blemish upon the church. Like I'm an unwanted, like, bastard son. Some stepson that he'd rather have away. And it's because, we're faithful? Because we want the church to hold fast to its doctrines and its practice from ages upon ages upon ages of development and having been given to us by Christ himself, because I want that, and because I love the truth, and I want the church to speak the truth. I feel like I'm a unloved stepson that this Pope has nothing but scorn for. And that's something I wish, I wish would be addressed.
Do you want the love? But what would you have them do? I mean, look, everyone's approaching this from their own distinct position in the world and station. And doing these videos for a year, we're pretty much waiting for, Taylor and I, when we were making the TNT vids, I can tell people out there, honestly, I get asked lots of questions on DM. When Vigano would drop a letter, this is when we felt like it was pay dirt. And we were doing videos in between. I think we made a lot of good videos, over 100 of them. But we felt like, okay, this is what we're doing this for, when Vigano would come out with another missive, always on a meaningful church calendar date, always with good either data or commentary. So everyone's approaching this from a different position. But I think I'm trying to give analysis on what Vigano is saying here, give it from his perspective, and he's just obviously he's kind of the shot clock way above the game, so he's seeing all the angles. He's had his eyes on these documents. He told us where you can find them in D.C. and where you can find them in Vatican City. Now they've certainly been shredded. There's no way they're not shredded. As I think Monsignor Charles Pope was the one to point. I mean, why are people talking about these? They're long gone. They have been, they're in Earth's environment. They've been shredded and burnt. So, I mean,
but isn't that an ecological sin?
Yeah. Well, they don't. These people are hypocritical beyond hypocritical. But the point is, so you're saying, oh man, I feel like I have a father that doesn't love. I mean, look, Vigano is out here saying anti-Christic. I mean, people can do the kind of arithmetic. That's not love that you need to lament lacking. It would be, I think, his response. This is hitting everyone in their own way at their own time. It's such big news. What's being suggested by Vigano in this newest missive is literally the Pachamama thing, the globothermo, stupid man-made global warming nonsense that we've been hearing about. It's been cooked up for 25 years.
Dude!
Agenda 2030. Agenda 2030 you really need to read. This is the most research I ever did for a single TNT show. We came out with it on my birthday in March of last year. It is really creepy stuff, and Pope Francis explicitly, in the Vatican statements on it, endorses the one world government stuff. Vigano's saying it here. He's recalling. There are lots of specific lines where the Pope, not collaborators of his, not theorists behind the scenes, are lining this all up. And he's calling it anti-Christic.
You know why it's anti-Christic? Here's why it's anti-Christic. Because as we can know what somebody really thinks through their actions, because actions speak louder than words, what I'm seeing, this is my sober, candid analysis. I don't want to be not giving proper deference to any of my spiritual fathers, but this is it. What's going on here is the Pope seems to love the world more than he loves Christ. He seems to love this temporary, fleeting world in which we're pilgrims on our way to heaven, on our way to the beatific vision, on our way to eternal love in the Trinitarian embrace. He seems to love this pain-addled valley of tears more than that, which means he does love creation more than the Creator, which means he loves this world more than Christ himself. And you can't have a spiritual father whose priorities are that out of whack. So we need to call Pope Francis to repentance. That is what's anti-Christic. Well, no, of course,
he's been called so
laugh because of all of the charade, all of the act, the hypocrisy about this being the pontificate of humility. I mean, this guy doesn't even take the time to listen to the concerns of the faithful. He holds us in contempt. He holds our concerns in contempt. He chides us. He finger wags at us for having the audacity to even to question this strange new direction that the church is going. That's not humility. That's the opposite of it. That's pompousness, pomp, arrogance. And so it really inverts the, what would you call it, the propaganda attached to this papacy. Oh, we're going to be modest. We're going to be poor. You know, I'm going to wear soiled linens or cheap linens or ones that are made from like lower grade cotton. It's like, whatever. Wear silk. Just be a good spiritual father to us.
Yeah, the change of papal apartment to the Domus Santa Marte allegedly costs more than the original papal palace.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, and that's it. It's this facade of being humble. It's the facade of...
Humilitized.
Humiliated.
Humble.
Yeah.
No, it's a complete facade. But I mean, I've been calling him Francis the Humble. I wish I'd made up the little nickname since I think 2013, because it's so obviously we're responding, and this is really, I think, productive. You're responding in a general way. These are all things that I've been saying the whole time. Vigano, I'm trying to keep it on point with, like, dude, I mean, Vigano is literally, let's go to the next paragraph. Vigano is saying, during the recent synod, a grave sacrilegious act was consummated through the inaugural celebration, October 4th, held in the Vatican Gardens, and the appearance of the Pachamama in St. Peter's and Santa Maria in Trespontina, the worship of the living and true God, revealed and manifested in Jesus Christ, whom the Catholic Church adores and professes, has been contaminated by clearly idolatrous and syncretistic elements. Now, Archbishop Vigano is a smart guy. He adds in the adverb, as writers we're called not to use adverbs unless they're really necessary, because it's a cheap dressing. Clearly idolatrous and syncretistic elements. The idea is when something's clear, you don't have to say it's clear. When something's obvious, you don't have to say it's obvious. He, however, is writing for the 90%. According to Aristotle, those who will miss anything, they'll miss the forest for the trees. Therefore, he tells us it's clearly idolatrous. I think what's new in this letter, it bears repeating one more time, is that the idolatrous attempt was not a kind of weaponized political correctness, whereby he got caught at the Pachamama worshiping ceremony on October 4th and kind of he was caught holding the bag and didn't know how to respond. The Pachamama on Netflix, in the UN educational reforms, there are a couple other pop culture appearances of Pachamama that are really striking and global. That the Vatican is having material sent to it. It's not borrowing from the world. It is actually playing a role in what appears to be a preordained, widespread publication of the Pachamama demon who kills her kids. It's striking stuff. He's really specific. Whether or not people are there where Vigano is, he's saying, he's putting all these dots in a constellation, people. He's saying globothermo, the ridiculous anthropogenic global warming, Agenda 2030, globalism, one world government, which is in the title of this article missive on LifeSite. He's thinking way beyond just Pope Francis is an unloving father and doesn't really like, because he's a man of the left, he doesn't really like evangelization. This is just way beyond that.
But it all joins up. He's saying clearly there is idolatry going on. It's like, fine, even if the Pope doesn't agree with our position, it doesn't agree with the position of Archbishop Vigano, that there is idolatry going on, and it's clearly happening, and we're reneging on all these duties as Christians to bring forth the gospel to the world. The Pope knows that we believe that in good faith, All of the Catholic world, when he became Pope and made his first address, we weren't sitting around trying to pick him apart, trying to say, oh, I don't like this guy, I don't want to support his pontificate. So he knows we're not of just bad will towards him. And yet, whenever there's a legitimate criticism, and there have been many times that there needed to be legitimate criticisms during this pontificate, even if he disagrees with them, but he sees they're coming from a good place, it's tended to make him infuriated. It's made him in a rage. It's made him brush us off, brush us aside with disdain. And that I don't understand, because if I'm the father of my children, and they come to me, and they say, Dad, I don't understand why you did this thing. It hurt my feelings. I'm not understanding. You're not fulfilling your duty in this way to us. That doesn't make me, angry at them. I might have to explain things to them and say, look, I didn't mean any offense. I didn't do this with the intention of harming our family. I'm not meaning to keep our family not on the right path. I either might have fallen short in this way, and then I take responsibility for the mistake and I own it, or I say, look, I need to sort this out. I owe you an explanation. I've been right the whole time, but this is why. And here's your explanation. We're not getting that. We're not getting that fatherly response of hearing criticism and either rebuking it and teaching why Dad's way is right, and we're not getting the fatherly response of being like, mea culpa, I own this, let me walk this back, I understand your concerns. And that's part of being a good father, is being humble, is being prepared to apologize to one's children, is being prepared to take something back and be like, I'm not perfect. Even parents make mistakes. Sure, as a matter of fact, I think, just going one step farther, I think that's why a lot of people kind of from the baby boomer generation fell away from their parents, because there was this hard line, we're the greatest generation, whatever I say goes, I can act like a tyrant in my own home. And as much as you guys know that I'm all for the patriarchy, a real patriarch is Christ-like. And if Christ were to err, of course he can't because he's God, but if he ever were to, then he would be the meekest man alive. So, the final word on this, Tim, from my point of view is, I think that proves that Pope Francis doesn't have goodwill.
Well, sure.
Yeah. Well, no, but we laugh because you can be in error without having bad will. I think this is almost definitive proof. The silence, the pontificate of silence, is proof of malice.
Well,
proof of bad will.
The idolatry, the Arianism, the lack of belief in Jesus' resurrection, the open sure. worship of demonic goddesses. This is just, I'm just trying to give. I'm going to get a couple of paragraphs in here because I think it serves well for people out there to hear paragraph by paragraph. Vigano, who knows far more than us and far more than the listener out there, he's just saying, here it is. I mean, this is not just a father that's a bad father, right? A bad papa that's, or an absconding papa, to use Benedict XVI's language before he absconded. It's way beyond that. It is pushing demonic idols on the world into the public eye. And we don't know exactly how the demonic works. Maybe just seeing it is bad for us. That seems to be the agenda. Idolatry, he writes.
I know seeing that hideous thing was bad for me.
It wasn't good for my digestion. Right. Idolatry, or its simulation, represents the most serious attack perpetrated against the divine majesty. Commandment 1, people. The martyrs shed their blood and paid for their resistance of idolatry with the supreme gift of their lives. Those same martyrs who have drenched and consecrated the earth of ancient pagan Rome has seen their glorious memory profaned by the celebrations of the Pachamama. Shortly after the Pachamama, we had the Moloch, the giant Moloch, right outside. It's still there right now as part of a quote-unquote art exhibit of the Canaanite gods. It's very fitting with what Vigano is saying. He's insinuating there's a mother Pachamama swallows her children. Moloch literally devours children, and all of it has been signed off on by the Vatican. I didn't know that until the story broke about the Moloch, that the Colosseum was allegedly under the control of the Vatican. The scriptures, he continues, particularly the Old Testament, teaches that idolatry is shamelessness and prostitution. It is the profanation of the nuptial covenant that God has entered into with his people. This is, I think, Dave's, if I had to guess, Dave's favorite paragraph. Now, St. Paul, for his part, warns the first Christians of Corinth. What do I imply then? That an idol is anything? No, I imply that what pagans sacrifice they offer to the demons and not to God. I do not want you to be partners with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the table of the Lord and the table of demons. Shall we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than he?
Dude, this is the final fruit of relativism. So the relativism has been tacitly approved of by basically everybody in Western culture for the last 40 years, right? We're always having to mindlessly regurgitate empty tropes about, oh, the culture in the Middle East, in some of these Muslim countries, it's beautiful in its own way. No, it's filthy, it's vulgar, and it's evil. They beat women and, deny basic human rights. They subjugate Christians. They subjugate the true faith. So it's an awful culture. Not all cultures are equal. Pope Benedict XVI said that if all ideas are of equal intellectual merit, then cannibalism is merely a matter of taste. That's the attitude of disgust we need to have for bad cultures, with bad ideas, with ugly art, with Pachamama, ugly, wooden, topless, obese art. Yeah, I'm disgusted by it. But the attitude of relativism has crept it's gotten so deeply intertwined in our flesh, in our sinews in the West, that we've had to goose step along with this silliness for way too long, paying mindless homage to the pointless, meaningless, ugly, distorted art of primitive cultures. I'm sorry, Pachamama's ugly. But Pope Francis is drunk by imbibing the relativist filth for too long, so that now he's bringing this pagan idol. And unless he really did mean to have people worshiping that statue in the Vatican, if he was doing this out of ignorance, it means he saw it fit to bring this pagan idol, this ugly piece of culture, into the Vatican and have it there side by side with the most beautiful art on earth.
Well, wait. People don't feel like we need to be preaching to one another, the choir. If let's just keep it real pithy. Why would he have included your perfectly appropriate way? I think various people out there will benefit by hearing. Okay, we're not all of one mind about exactly what this strange, shocking news means. Like Cora says in Last of the Mohicans, we do not understand what we are about yet. It's just big, so it's fine. This is the kind of thing over which reasonable minds can differ.
Do you think it could be, Tim?
Why is he quoting St. Paul saying this here about the demons?
All right. In your opinion, do you think that this could be a misplaced, faux admiration for what the West would perceive as the art of a primitive culture, or do you think it on more of Vigano's wavelength that it is just certainly formal idolatry?
Yeah, I think it's. I think with all of the news stories that I've covered alone and commentated on over the last year, not at all. Skojic was saying the same thing. I don't think. I would be like witnessing a train wreck and then saying, do you think that was a train or a plane? It's right there.
I think we can say it's materially idolatry, right? I'm just wondering if the Pope is a formal idolater, is what I'm asking at this point. I don't know.
Put it out there.
Nothing would surprise me, especially after the Scalfari interviews, right? The open...
Arianism.
It's been 6 or 7 different things, right?
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, and hell doesn't... I don't get how you get around it. I don't get why, assuming that we're kind of letting Vigano be his own authority, since it's his letter, he's the one quoting Corinthians, saying, this is demonic, this is intentional idol worship. It was really the Pope's apparatus, a communications apparatus, that came out, and really it was about 2.5 weeks into the Synod where they first acknowledged it was Pachamama that was being worshipped. As they said, yes, these are idols, but they should not have been thrown into the Tiber. This was the response to the Teshegual idol dunking. And
what's the reasoning for that? How can you possibly say this is a filthy pagan idol, but we shouldn't cast it out of the most sacred city on earth, right?
Literally, look how effective it is. People still aren't grabbing their pitchforks and I don't know that ever happened. We see that in like Beauty and the Beast, right? That the angry villagers have had enough and they grab their pitchforks. I don't mean literally. I mean even figuratively.
I don't even own a pitchfork.
Mine is in disrepair. But I mean, you get what I'm saying. People have never, because I think the news cycle is so short and people now are pseudo-literate, the memory is shorter than ever. Like you were quoting earlier, Dostoevsky wrote, "Man gets used to everything, the scoundrel." And we've kind of been cooked, even those of us in the Catholic commentariat. We've been cooked in a different way, an opposite way from the people out there listening. So, I mean, he's quoting St. Paul saying this is demonic idol worship. He goes on to say that the church, instead of being vigilant and denouncing the threats which menace her and darken the horizon of the entire human family, I was talking about they love this idea of the horizons in Europe, European scholars. The church is lending itself to serve as a sounding board for a utopian and anti-Christic ideology. I read this last night and I said anti-Christian. It's anti-Christic, meaning of or concerning the Antichrist. Is in a frightening subjection to the powerful forces that dominate the world scene and are actively promoting vast processes aimed at the establishment of a world government. So no, if we're with Vigano on it, he has all this lined up in a way where he's saying, I think they're sticking Pachamama, a real demon, out there to transfix the world's attention, to do darkling things, and they want to take power, and Pope Francis is the point man here. He has much more information than we do. He goes on, faced with such a scenario in which the very survival of the Catholic Church is seriously threatened in the face of so many reprehensible actions and statements by the Supreme Pontiff, Dave, 100 scholars have drafted a declaration asking respectfully for Pope Francis to publicly and without ambiguity repent and repair those outrages. I, Vigano, felt it was my duty to unite my own voice to theirs. He's not playing. In similar fashion, all bishops and cardinals of the Catholic Church should feel obliged to address a fraternal correction to Pope Francis for these scandals. Too many to count.
At this point, what's the point? Fine. Aim the fraternal correction, but he's not going to listen, it seems.
Well, if they all would do it, though, then you can talk. If they would all do it at once, you can talk new canonical measures. Right.
Well, no one judges the Pope, though. That's canon law. Now, what they can do is use basically soft coercion. They can say to him, look, you need to do this. All the bishops are against you. All these bishops are basically rooting for this pontificate to take a change of course. But that's not going to happen because we don't have, I don't think, a quorum of the bishops anymore. Too many, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know if it's careerism or just plain old yellow belly cowardice. But too many bishops are just sitting, maybe trying to weather the storm. It's hard to count who's on our side versus who's on the side of the new church because there's just so much silence. There's like 3 guys that you hear speaking up about it. So we need to, the real church versus the anti-church. Bishops, this is not a time to sit quietly in the shadows. We don't know how long this pontificate's going to go on. We don't know how much damage is going to be done. If we had a big enough number of faithful bishops rise up and say, enough is enough, you're teaching error, we're going to draft a huge statement about this, we're going to take this to you and make a loud stink, then, that would slow his momentum. Right now, because of the absolute silence, because of the dearth of pushback, the momentum isn't slowing. As a matter of fact, they're getting emboldened and it's picking up. So I don't know what kind of strategy has been carved out here. Is there a silent resistance? Is there a passive resistance? I don't know, but it's wrong.
I want to remind all the traditional-minded people out there that have been talking about in terms of the adequate regimes, the governing structures of actual politics. There are 3 ones that we can pick from according to Thomas Aquinas. They've been wildly enthralled with monarchy. In theory, the best. What Thomas, Aristotle, Plato, Bellarmine, they all agreed. The problem with monarchy is, this comes directly from Book 7 of the Republic, and they all agree on this. You don't want to disagree with those 4 or 5 guys when they're all in agreement. when monarchy becomes corrupted, it becomes the worst and the most dangerous. And I'm only pointing this out not to thumb anybody in the eye, but to show this is the value where it's possible to have something like a republic or a mixed regime, because there are more stop blocks against such tyranny. And no, I'm not suggesting the church should ever be anything but a pure monarchy, because it shouldn't.
We don't embrace conciliarism, right?
No, obviously not. Or Gallicanism or any of the various sorts of that. That's all. It's a done deal in the church. It has to be a monarchy. I'm just showing you can't get a bad monarch out, you know. And so this is what we're living through. And I'm just saying, if you carry it, there's nothing to be done here for the church but to wait it out. But people, this is what St. Thomas and all of the pedigree of great thinkers are talking about. We're waiting for this.
You know what?
Want to take some questions?
Opiated. Give me one sec. We're being kind of opiated here, because through this weird, sick irony that perhaps the most strong-handed and imperious pontificate in history that we've seen, at least for a long time, has embraced this. Has publicly embraced this persona, this atmosphere of synodality. It's weird, and the reason for that is we're being opiated, we're being satiated. Oh, well, you know, there's synodality. He's really listening. He's listening to what the universal church is saying. He's picking up not just what this Eurocentric, American-centric church is feeling and thinking and what its issues are. Pope Francis, he's looking out for the small churches, the church in the Amazon, the church in, you know, sub-Saharan Africa, and all this. And that's not what he's doing at all. You know, as we've said many times on the show, the people that were from the Amazon Synod, the people of the Amazon, they were used as pawns, as stooges, to push a very top-down agenda. It's not a listening campaign that's going on here. It's everything has been pre-decided that has taken place in this pontificate. It's been brewing in the church for 30 years with a lot of the bad cardinals.
And some Gallen Mafia was all, you know, we're really, the Eugenio Scalfari is releasing this new book on interviews with Pope Francis and with Cardinal Martini, who was the dawn of the St. Gallen Mafia. I will be buying and reading that book the first night it's available in English, because it will be interesting. I'm confident. Call me out if I'm wrong. I'm always happy to admit it. There's going to be a total identity between what Cardinal Martini said he wanted 20, 30 years ago and what we've seen. And then I will come back and I will say, look.
But so why this fake commitment, you know, the fake public commitment to synodality and to fake listening, when we know that the synod documents are being drafted well in advance before the dialogue with indigenous peoples has occurred? So why do you guys think that's happening? Obviously, it's a strategy to give the illusion of listening, the illusion of hearing out the people in the marginalized churches, in the marginalized regions, so that the good guys in the church, who would speak out about this thing, are going to be slower to do so, because they think that the Vatican is maybe just representing the interests of other people that we don't understand. It's opiate. It's an opiate for us to calm us down and to basically kill our reactions, to satiate us, to pacify us. That's what's going on.
Yeah.
That's how you, I guess, get over this tension between this really strong-armed regime that we have right now and the commitment to synodality.
So the closing of this thing reads, from today's Ambrosian liturgy, which is cool. He's reading from the Hours here. O God, who in the grace of adoption has called us to become children of light, let us no longer be enveloped by the darkness of error, but grant us to remain always in your truth, so as to illumine the night of the world. It's beautiful. Come, Lord Jesus,
Maranatha,
enjoins, manifest your sovereign royalty over your church and the world. Reject not the plea of your bride, and do not disappoint her expectation. And when you do not grant what we ask of you, let us wait for it with faithful perseverance and penitent love.
Tim, can I close out on my end with one other thing too?
We're at an hour, so yeah.
Sure. Let me
let's get to some questions
end us here. What I want, I've heard Pope Francis say that the American commentariat is so hard on him and it is like a hostile force to him. I just want to reassure our Father the Pope that if he just pivots, if he just kind of pivots away from this attitude of arrogance, and really starts to hold fast to the doctrines and morals that the church has held since it was given them by Christ himself, we're all for you. You're in our prayers, Holy Father. Don't think that we're out against you. We're only here to preserve the deposit of faith and to do our duty as soldiers of Christ, right? It's not that we have some personal animus against you. We pray for your pontificate to take a turn and start upholding those beautiful doctrines and dogmas that were handed to us by our divine Savior. So don't think of us as an enemy. But if things keep going this way, where there is, heresy, there are false doctrines, where there is idolatry that's being sponsored by the Vatican, then you make us your de facto enemies. I don't like to use the word, but know that you're in our prayers, and that if there were ever to be an opportunity for real dialogue, we would embrace it. That's for real dialogue, where it's not a foregone conclusion that the progressive side is going to win out.
And if pigs ever fly, I want to ride, right? But I mean, I will. That's fair. We're each speaking for our own good mind, and I declare myself with as little hypocrisy endemic to the declaration as possible. I'm an enemy of the anti-gospel, the false gospel, and let the chips fall where they may. I think I know where the major parties involved are, at least on that side, and I'm an enemy of the anti-gospel. So whatever that means between individuals in the Vatican and myself, that's fine. I mean, they've already known this for a year or so. But pray for the office, pray for the goodwill of the Pope.
Right. We're an enemy of all enemies of the church, and that means interior enemies and exterior enemies.
Right.
I just wanted to say, though, I don't want, if there were just an iota, just a shrivel of goodwill in some of these maybe far gone cardinals, maybe even the Pope, I want them to know that there's always this crack in the door and that we haven't forever written them off. We pray for them to come into the bosom of the church and to love the church as Christ loves his bride.
Sure.
Right? That's all, we're simpatico here.
Yeah. Okay, so I got a question here, Sean Wu. I know you have disagreements about Chesterton when it comes to distributism, but what do you think of his novels? Thomas Aquinas' book is generally very good, and his aphorisms are very good. Dave, do you have any questions? Oh, someone asked me what my favorite Simpson episode is. I'm just running through mine. Mr. Plow and the Monorail episode, both written by Mr. Conan O'Brien. The guy's a genius.
Yeah, I concur, actually. Alright, so I have a question from one of my Patreons. What does successful education of one's daughters look like? And, I'm trying not to use the name of the Patreon just to preserve anonymity. If you ever do want me to give you a shout out and you're one of my supporters, then I'm happy to do that. I just, out of courtesy to you, I'm not going to unless you explicitly say so. So what does the successful education of one's daughters look like? The successful education of my daughters means that they are educated towards their vocation, which is to be either a spiritual mother or an earthly mother, right? So Pope Pius XII says all women are made for motherhood, whether spiritual or earthly. So I need to give my daughters the tools that they need to succeed in their vocation. So that means I need to raise them to be, first of all, of goodwill, to love the truth, to love what's right and to hate what's wrong. That's first and foremost duty of a parent. Second of all, I need to raise them to be pious. I need to raise them in the bosom of the church. Third of all, I need to raise them to embrace femininity. And that means meekness, humility, modesty, and passivity. Remember, the man is the active principle. Procreation tells us about our very nature as human beings. So since the man is the active principle in procreation, we know that he is the active principle in family life, whereas the woman is receptive. So that's why it turns everybody's stomach when you see some naggy wife barking at her husband. That's why we have these, just very natural feelings of disdain for that. So I'm going to teach them to be receptive and yet pious. So to have strong love for God and strong feelings of allegiance to truth. But at the same time, deference and receptivity to a husband who is going to be her spiritual head, or the head of her convent, her nunnery, whoever her spiritual superior is going to be. So there's always going to be a position of deference. I also, successful education of daughter, we used to have a robust system of Catholic colleges in the United States, even 40s and the 50s, until they were ruined and driven out of business by the coeducational feminist failed model of colleges, which basically train people for careers and professions. But we used to have this sober analysis of what the purpose of education for women was, and we all know kind of in our very hearts that women are meant for spiritual or earthly motherhood. So the Catholic colleges would basically teach them strong things in the humanities. They would strengthen their knowledge of the humanities so they could teach their own children well. They could communicate with their own children well. And it would also teach them about home economics, so actual usable home skills. And I think, if I were to be able to raise my daughter so she can do her vocation, so she can get to heaven, because the point of raising our kids is to get them to heaven with us. That's what my only desire for my family is to be with them in eternity, worshiping God in the beatific vision, enfolded in this Trinitarian love. If I can do that, I don't care if they grow up to be garbage men. I don't care if they grow up to not have this lofty station in life. If they're of the lowest and most humble stations, as long as they're with me in heaven one day, God willing that I get to heaven myself, then I will have succeeded in raising my daughter.
So we've been requested to mention the importance of prayer reparation to help the exorcists on December 6th. Important day. Thank you for the tip. Really good. Question coming from Carl. Why are there so many people like Catholic Answers EWTN still defending the Pope? I mean, Pope Francis saying God wills other religions is quite concerning. Carl, here's my answer to you, friend. I don't know. It's whack. It's crazy. It's inexplicable. Alan Rule asks, does the enemy feel that since the first Vigano letter that their position is exposed and they're now speeding up the agenda because they know this papacy is limited? Yes, absolutely. I give pretty good analysis in our Steve Skojic episode of, well, I think it was pretty good analysis of Epoch 1, 2, and 3 of this church.
Pat yourself on the back.
You could do it.
I give super badass analysis.
But I think after the end of 1, there was acceleration. After the end of 2, section 2 of this pontificate, it's been hyper-acceleration. For this one, Dave can do, is it valid to believe that future bishops and cardinals will officially judge Francis's papacy as valid or invalid?
Yes, that is valid. And as a matter of fact, this happened with Pope Honorius I, who in his life promulgated the error of monothelitism, that Christ only had one will as opposed to two, because Christ is truly divine and truly man, so he has everything that's proper to God and everything that's proper to man. That means he has two wills, the divine will and the human will. But Pope Honorius I promulgated this error of monothelitism, that Christ only had one will, and he was posthumously excommunicated by the church, by the bishops and cardinals. So this can happen to Pope Francis. They can go back, and I mean, there's a lot of questions about the validity of Benedict XVI's resignation. Was he forced out? Does that make it invalid? And then whether or not the St. Gallen Mafia, if Pope Francis was complicit with it in the first place, maybe he wasn't validly elected. I'm not taking a position on that because I don't feel like I have the data to know it all. But these are open questions, and there's some legitimate reason to raise them. So
the answer is yes. The short answer is definitely yes.
At the beginning, you can start from the outset and say this was never a legitimate papacy. He was never validly elected, or Pope Benedict XVI never validly resigned, or you can say that they might say posthumously, and again, no one judges the Pope while he's alive, canonically, but they might say posthumously, the Pope has excommunicated himself by adhering to these false doctrines. This is a very real thing that could happen.
AJ asks, how can we get the remaining cardinals and bishops to actually take action? No more book releases, to do action that bishops should do to defend and protect the church. I mean, just through filial appeals, are they mostly impotent? Yes. It's just, you know, I mean, if you have an abusive father and you ask him, look, this is hurting me, you're hurting me, can you please stop? Could you please stand up for me? If you have a slightly less abusive, more just a derelict father that won't help you when you're being hurt by some other force or agent, you just ask. That's all you can do. We have really no more power with our own bishop or bishops than with the Bishop of Rome. It's really unfortunate.
And you know, there's a corollary here. A lot of times in the course of our women must submit to the authority of their husbands. You'll get this question raised, like, well, what if your husband is saying things that you know are wrong, not necessarily sinful, because the woman's obedience to the man never has to take place when he's commanding affirmative sin. But if he's just being rude or mistreating the wife, what is the wife to do? It's the same predicament, because the wife can't sit in judgment over the husband. Again, Scripture tells us this, that the head of the woman is the man, and the head of the man is Christ. So Christ sits in judgment over the husband. Sometimes it's like you just got to take your lumps and pray, and there's no, you can't always have your way at the end of a bayonet. Sometimes the answer is to just suffer. And that doesn't mean don't try to correct your husband. Don't try to correct an errant father. You should try and reason with him. But that reasoning doesn't have teeth at the end of the day. It's always going to be a plea, a request.
Yeah, we have a final question from about the nature of the needfulness of new priests and bishops in the Amazon. It's essentially a Trojan horse. When they did a study on the way that the demographics were centered and the lack of priests there in the Amazon, it turns out to be the lack of priests that we have in urban cities, urban centers around the West as well. So, I mean, someone was asking, is SSPX a viable solution? I mean, it's not a realistic solution, because we have, other good orders that are in full, whatever you think of the SSPXs. I'm not weighing in here. I'm just saying fully canonically regular orders like the Norbertines or FSSP that could do, they could do it just as well. I mean, yes, I'd rather have SSPX there in the Amazon than Bishop Kreitler, of course. But no, they won't be implemented, because that's not the agenda. That's not Agenda 2030. Someone else is asking who my favorite and Dave was a good, better skateboarder than I was. We were both decent. No, we were both decent. I posted a video of me falling. That was when I was 38, and I was trying to get it back some. People were asking why I got rid of that. It was because it was being used against me by some of my many adversaries. Maybe I'll repost it just for giggles. But my favorite skaters growing up were Peter Smolik. I liked Brandon Bevel.
Just because you look like Peter Smolik, right?
Yeah, people thought I was Peter Smolik some. And Brian Anderson.
Wait, didn't you like Chad Muska?
No, I never liked Muska. I know he's just
a
rails guy.
I think the first video I ever saw was yours of Muska.
Yeah, I know. I was never a fan. He's good. I just always found him boring and over technical. Like a pre-Eric Costin. We both liked Brian Anderson a lot.
I liked Ardo Sari.
You liked Ardo. Ardo's based. I like Tom Penny. I liked his style.
Yeah, he did have a good style. Style goes a long way in things.
It does. And you were the one that pointed out to me in terms of skating, obviously, this is basic. Landing your tricks on the bolts is number one, and it always looks better with a taller, lankier skater. It adds to the crispness of landing tricks and whatnot.
Oh, Tom, but keep going.
No, you got it. Yeah, people out there, I do want to give a plug to Love Your Motherboards. They're actually motherboards. Here we have my personalized deck. This is the Catholic Republic deck. These are good people. They great, beautiful shirts, beautiful art designs on shirts, decks, tons of cool stuff. Even they put out notebooks and little school supplies. I want to kick a shout out to all of the people that have supported us. Carry Your Cross, carryyourcrosslifestyle.com. I think they're still ordering. They're still offering special deals for their cool T-shirts and gear and whatnot to people that type in code TIM. We've really been lucky enough to be sponsored by a bunch of really good Catholic families. So please, everyone, support them as far as you can. We're also on Crusade Radio Network with Mike Church. We're behind his paywall 2 times a week. Please go subscribe there. You can get extra Rules for Retrogrades content. And Mike's one of my Catholic radio heroes, one of my only real Catholic radio heroes. It's a real honor to be on board. So we just want to say what's up to all those people too. We're trying to keep these shows to an hour, which is why we're rushing through your questions. But we really appreciate over 300 people in the live chat tonight. Pray the Rosary. This is one thing I've started up. It's the little office of the Blessed Virgin Mary, not as comprehensive as going through even the Reformed Breviary, but it's a short version where you're still going through the hours, and I do it very imperfectly, just kind of when I can remember, but people are asking how to beef up their daily devotional in addition to just a daily rosary. I've found this very profitable. A friend gave it to me. Yeah, this is what we acknowledge. Everyone say the novena to the great saints, especially we've been thinking about Saint Joseph. Yeah. We've really been thinking about Saint Joseph a lot. It's a beautiful thing. Saint Joseph, the great overlooked saint.
Especially in the day of feminism. Like, Saint Joseph is the anti-feminism.
And absconding Father's Day.
Right.
He's our stepfather, like the Lord. There's something to, if you feel that you've been left behind by your Holy Father, your biological father, Saint Joseph. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and just masculinity in general. I mean, Saint Joseph is like the ultimate man for masculinity. So my family just got done with the novena to him, and so we're kind of constantly saying a string of them, or we're constantly in between them, I should say. Yeah, and guys, please do continue to support us. Continue to support us on Patreon through the live chats. These take time and resources to do. We hate to be beggars. It is uncomfortable, but please, we need you. We need your help. We need your support.
And subscribe and share on these things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the Patreon thing is new to both of us, but it is what keeps the lights on, as it were. And yeah, please support the endeavor. We have our 2 new books coming out, one in January, the other in late February or March. The first will be Rules for Retrogrades, the namesake of this program, with tan books. The second one will be No Christian Feminism. We're still racing to get the final bells and whistles attached there too. That will be, I'm guessing, March, maybe February. That's with Sophia Institute Press, and that's going to be the bombshell, is the No Christian Feminism. We were already suffering the slings and arrows of white martyrdom. Hopefully it stays white, but not red. But yeah, so lots of stuff in the pipeline. Please continue supporting us where you can.
Yeah,
and thank you to all of our super chatters who hit us up tonight. I was seeing this on the computer screen. We really appreciate it. Please subscribe, share, like, tell your friends by word of mouth.
And it's going to get real when the feminism book drops.
It will.
It's already gotten, in the wake of just some of the interviews we've done leading up to it, we've gotten significant pushback, and I pretty much got fired from my job. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
It's going to get real.
It will. It absolutely will. Yeah, it's been very, very salty lately. So let's wrap up, and everyone, there's one last thing I was going to say. But yeah, we have Dr. Taylor Marshall on. We'll be on our Wednesday show next week. Steve Skojic will be on the Monday show. We have a great lineup of guests. We've really been blessed with them. But return to TNT on Wednesday. TNT plus D plus X, as Chris goes by. You guys have a great weekend. God bless, and pray for our Pope and our church.
Peace out.
Peace out.